When I turned 65, I planned a birthday dinner for the whole family. I spent 3 full weeks getting everything just right, choosing the menu, picking out fresh flowers for the dining room, and calling each person to make sure they were coming. I even treated myself to a new dress, navy blue with delicate pearl buttons, the kind my husband Jack always said made me look classy. I set the table for 8, wrote out name cards in my best handwriting. Jack Morgan. Little Caleb who just turned 7. Sweet Lily only 5. My sister Diane and her husband Frank. And me, sitting at the head of the table where I could see everyone's smiling faces as we celebrated together. By 6:30 no one had arrived. I checked my phone again and again thinking maybe I'd gotten the time wrong, but there it was, clear as day in my calendar. Birthday dinner, 6 p.m. I'd even sent everyone reminders 2 days earlier. At 7 I called Jack straight to voicemail. I tried Morgan's phone, then Diane's. Nothing. Diane not answering was especially strange. She always picks up by the second ring. I stood in my dining room staring at the untouched plates. The candles I'd lit an hour ago were nearly burned out. The roast was going cold in the oven, and the chocolate cake I'd spent all morning baking sat perfectly untouched on the counter. I tried to convince myself maybe there was traffic or something unexpected had come up. Things happen, I thought. But my chest was tight and my hands wouldn't stop trembling. By 8 o'clock I knew. They weren't coming. I sank into my chair and looked at the empty seats around me. This wasn't just someone running late. This was something else entirely. The silence in the house didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow, like even the walls were waiting. That's when I made the mistake of opening Facebook. Right at the top of my feed was a photo that knocked the breath out of me. Morgan, glowing in a white sundress with her arm wrapped around Jack. He was smiling wider than I'd seen in years. Behind them, the endless blue of the ocean stretched to the horizon. The caption read, "Living our best life on the Mediterranean. So blessed for this amazing family getaway." I scrolled down. More pictures. Caleb and Lily building sandcastles on a perfect beach. Diane and Frank sipping cocktails at what looked like a fancy ship's lounge. Everyone was there. Everyone but me. The post had gone up just an hour ago, while I was sitting at that empty table waiting. They were thousands of miles away, laughing over sunset drinks, popping champagne. I felt something inside me crack. Not break but crack like a frozen lake in sudden cold. This wasn't an accident. Morgan had planned that trip for my birthday, left me out of it, and managed to get everyone else to go along. Even Diane, my own sister who helped me pick out tablecloths just last week. I stared at that photo until my eyes stung. Morgan's smile looked just a little too proud, almost like she was celebrating something more than just the cruise. She stood where I should have been, surrounded by the people I loved most. That's when my phone buzzed. Text from Jack. "Sorry, Mom. Forgot to mention, we're out of town this week. Morgan surprised us with a trip. Happy birthday, though. Forgot to mention." Like a cruise was something you just forget to tell your mother about. Like booking it on my birthday was just coincidence. I set the phone down gently. I didn't trust myself not to throw it across the room. The roast was cold. I walked into the kitchen and shut off the oven. My movements felt strange, like I was watching someone else. A woman in a navy dress cleaning up a dinner no one showed up for. I wrapped the cake in plastic and put it in the fridge. Blew out what was left of the candles. Stacked the good china back in the cabinet, one plate at a time, the sound of porcelain clinking echoing in the stillness. Morgan had won something tonight. I just wasn't sure what game we'd been playing. All I knew was, for the first time in 65 years, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt erased. When I turned off the dining room lights, I saw my reflection in the window. I looked smaller somehow. Faded. The woman staring back at me was the one who always kept the peace, remembered birthdays, smoothed over arguments, and put family first. And they'd chosen to pretend I didn't exist. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step heavier than the one before. Tomorrow I'd have to deal with the fallout. The half-hearted apologies, the lies about mixed-up plans, and Morgan's sugary voice explaining how the trip was booked ages ago, and there was just nothing they could do. That night I didn't even try to sleep. I just sat with the hurt, letting it settle deep in my chest. Something told me this wasn't just about a missed birthday dinner. It felt bigger, more intentional than I'd dared admit. I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling as memories from the past 5 years ran through my mind like a loop I couldn't turn off. The birthday party hadn't been forgotten. It had been deliberately erased. And the more I thought, the more other memories began to surface, each one more painful than the last. I remembered Caleb's 4th birthday party. I'd been so excited to see him blow out his candles. But when I got to the venue, Morgan met me at the door with that polished, apologetic smile she always used when she was lying. "Oh, Linda, didn't Jack tell you? We had to move it to tomorrow. Something last minute came up." But I could hear kids laughing inside. I saw balloons through the windows. Later, when I called Jack, he sounded confused. "What do you mean tomorrow?" "No, Mom, the party's today." Morgan must have mixed up the dates. Then there was Lily's first day of kindergarten. I'd asked Morgan 3 separate times what time they were dropping her off so I could be there with my camera. "Oh, we're going super early," she told me. "Like 7 a.m., probably too early for you." I showed up anyway. The teacher said Lily had arrived at the regular time, 8:30. I missed seeing her walk into the classroom. Missed her tiny nervous wave goodbye to Jack. Last Christmas, Morgan called 2 days before. Her voice was tight, fake sweet. "Linda, I hate to do this, but Jack's just overwhelmed with work lately. He asked if we could keep Christmas small this year, just immediate family." So I spent the day alone, reheating leftovers and watching old holiday movies. A week later, Diane told me she'd seen pictures on Instagram. There had been a huge Christmas party, 20 guests, including Jack's old college friends and half the neighborhood. Everyone had been there. Except me. Each memory snapped into place like puzzle pieces, forming a truth I didn't want to face. This wasn't poor communication. It wasn't accidental. It was coordinated. It was deliberate. As the sky began to lighten, I got up and made a pot of coffee, my hands shaking from exhaustion and something else, a rising dread I couldn't push down. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through Morgan's social media posts from the past year, this time really looking. There she was at Caleb's school play, sitting in the front row beside Jack. That was the play I'd specifically asked about, the one she told me had been cancelled due to a flu outbreak. There she was again at Lily's dance recital. That was supposedly just a casual practice. Post after post showed family moments I hadn't even known about. Every caption gushed about blessed family memories, and grateful for these beautiful people. What hurt most was how natural it all looked. Morgan's arm linked through Jack's. The kids cuddled up close. Everyone smiling like they belonged together. Like they didn't even notice I was missing. Like they were fine without me. I set the phone down slowly and walked to the kitchen window. Outside, the garden I'd planted when Jack was just a little boy stretched quiet in the morning light. He used to help me in those flower beds, his small hands so careful with the roots and stems. When had I lost that little boy? When had I stopped being part of his world? And then I knew, crystal clear. It had started when Morgan entered our lives. Before she came along, Jack called me twice a week. We had dinner every other Sunday. He'd tell me about work, ask for advice, laugh with me about silly things. He was my son, my confidant, my link to the family I'd helped build. But Morgan changed that slowly, so slowly I didn't notice until it was too late. Those Sunday dinners became once a month. "Morgan's been putting together these amazing meals," Jack would say. "She really likes having the weekends to ourselves." Then the phone calls turned into quick holiday check-ins. "Sorry, Mom, we're running around today. Morgan's got us booked solid." She never said anything outright. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she worked in silences, in carefully placed suggestions. "Your mom seemed tired the last time we saw her. Maybe she shouldn't have to keep the kids this weekend." Or, "I ran into your mom at the store yesterday. She looked a little confused. Do you think she's okay on her own?" Subtle hints, little nudges that painted me as fragile, as a burden. As someone you need to manage, not include. I thought about how she'd hug me at family events just a little too long, like she was comforting a great aunt instead of greeting her husband's mother. How she'd interrupt me when I was talking to the kids, redirecting them. "Grandma Linda's had a long day, sweethearts. Why don't you show Daddy your new toy instead?" And Jack, my bright, beautiful boy, he didn't even see it happening. He'd started looking at me the same way Morgan did. With kindness, yes. But also with pity. Like I was something sweet but fading, something no longer essential. The phone rang just then, snapping me out of the storm in my head. Jack's name lit up on my phone screen. His voice was cheerful, too cheerful, and it hit me like a punch to the chest. "Hey, Mom. Just wanted to call and wish you a happy belated birthday. Sorry we missed it, but this trip's been amazing." Morgan really outdid herself with the planning. I gripped the phone a little tighter. Yeah, I said, I saw the photos. Oh good, he replied. Morgan's been posting like crazy. The kids are having the time of their lives. Caleb learned to snorkel yesterday, and Lily made a little friend from Boston. You would have loved it. Would I? From where I sat, it didn't seem like anyone even noticed I was missing. I tried to keep my voice steady. That trip seemed very last minute. Jack chuckled. I know, right? Morgan found this unbelievable deal and just jumped on it. That's one of the things I love about her. She's so spontaneous. Spontaneous. That's what he called booking a cruise on my birthday and making sure I wasn't part of it. I started to speak, Jack, but stopped. What was I supposed to say? That his wife had spent years quietly shutting me out of his life? That she was manipulating him while smiling sweetly at every family gathering? He'd think I was bitter, jealous, unable to accept that my son had grown up. Maybe I was all of those things. But I was also right. You okay, Mom? You sound off. I closed my eyes, thinking of all the birthdays I'd miss, the milestones I'd never witness, the photos I'd never be in. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. Well, get some rest. We'll be home next week and I promise, we'll plan something special to make up for your birthday. Another promise I knew Morgan would quietly erase. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, letting the light shift across the floor as morning turned to afternoon. I thought about what the rest of my life might look like now. Holidays spent alone, empty chairs at every celebration, and a family that acted like I was never part of them at all. For the first time since my husband passed 8 years ago, I felt truly orphaned. Not by death but by something worse. The deliberate removal of my place in the only family I had left. But then something stirred inside me, hot and bright. I wasn't going to fade quietly. If Morgan thought she could erase me, she'd picked the wrong woman to try that with. I raised Jack when his father walked out on us. I worked 2 jobs to put him through college, gave up my own dreams so he could chase his. I earned my place in this family and I wasn't giving it up. I just needed to figure out exactly what I was up against. It was the following Tuesday morning. A full week after my ruined birthday dinner. I was still in my bathrobe, sipping my second cup of coffee and staring at the unopened box of thank you cards I'd bought for a celebration that never happened when the doorbell rang. The sound startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. At this point, unexpected visitors were rare in the carefully trimmed-down version of my social life. Through the peephole I saw a man I didn't recognize. Mid-40s maybe. Dark hair, tired eyes lined deep with worry. He looked sharp but travel-worn, like someone who'd been living out of a suitcase. His hands were stuffed in his coat pockets, and he kept glancing around like he wasn't sure he belonged here. Honestly, I almost didn't open the door. After the cruise, I had no patience for salesmen or missionaries or whoever this guy might be. But something about his posture, like he was mustering every ounce of courage just to stand on my porch, made me pause. Can I help you? I called through the door. Mrs. Bennett? His voice was cautious. Linda Bennett? Jack's mother. My heart skipped. How do you know my son's name? I asked. He hesitated, then said something that made the blood drain from my face. My name is David Chen. I need to talk to you about Morgan. I opened the door but left the chain in place. What about Morgan? I asked. David looked even more shaken up close. His hands were trembling and the dark circles under his eyes made it look like he hadn't slept in days. This is going to sound crazy, he said, but I think my son might be living in your son's house. The weight of the chain suddenly felt enormous in my fingers. What are you talking about? I asked. Caleb, he said. 7 years old, brown hair, scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike at 4. His words slammed into me. Caleb does have a scar on his chin. Jack had told me about the accident. The way they'd rushed him to the how scared everyone had been. But how could this stranger know that? I think you better come in, I whispered. David sat on the edge of my couch like he might jump up and run any second. I offered him coffee but he shook his head, his fingers gripping each other so tightly his knuckles turned white. I don't even know where to start, he said. This is going to sound insane. Try me, I told him. I've had a strange week myself. He took a shaky breath. Morgan and I were together for 2 years. Before she met your son. Before she got married. We lived together. Talked about getting married. The whole thing. Then she got pregnant. Suddenly, even holding my coffee felt like too much. I carefully set the cup down, worried it might slip from my fingers. David kept talking, his voice thick with pain from a wound that clearly hadn't healed. I was so happy, he said. I wanted to marry her right away, start a real life together. But Morgan, she kept stalling. Told me she needed time. That she wasn't ready for something so serious. Then one day I came home from work and she was gone. Just like that. Everything she owned had vanished. It was like she'd never lived with me at all. Did you try to find her? I asked. Of course I did, he said, his voice cracking slightly. For months. I filed a missing person report. Hired a private investigator. Posted online. Every platform I could think of. Nothing. It was like she disappeared into thin air. He rubbed his face with both hands, his exhaustion spilling out. Eventually the investigator told me to stop looking. Said, some people just don't want to be found. My stomach turned. I felt sick. What does any of this have to do with Caleb? I asked. David looked up at me. 3 months ago I was at a conference in Sacramento. During lunch I took a walk through downtown. That's when I saw her, Morgan, with a little boy. He looked exactly like me when I was that age. Same eyes, same chin, same little head tilt when he was concentrating. I followed them for 3 blocks, David admitted. And I watched that boy. I just knew. I knew he was mine. My head was spinning. You're saying Caleb is your son? I asked. I'm saying I believe he is, he said, voice steady. Morgan was about 2 months pregnant when she left. He carried that baby to term. Well, the timeline fits. He'd be Caleb's age now. He pulled out his phone and handed it to me. On the screen was a photo of David as a young boy, probably 6 or 7. The resemblance to Caleb was immediate and undeniable. The same dark brown eyes. That same stubborn little jawline. Even the small gap between his front teeth, the one Caleb always tried to hide when he smiled. My hands started to shake. Kids can look alike, I said, though even I didn't sound convinced. That's what I told myself at first, David replied. But I started digging. His voice sharpened. I hired another investigator. A better one this time. And here's the kicker. Morgan Martinez? That's not even her real name. Her birth name is Margaret Winters. He let that sink in. She's done this before. Disappeared when things got too complicated. Left men without a word when they started asking questions. David leaned closer, his voice low and urgent. The investigator found 2 other men. Both had relationships with her. Both said she vanished without warning. Just gone. Like she never existed. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. One of those men, he suspects she might have been pregnant when she left too, David added. My hands clutched the arms of the chair. Why are you telling me all of this? Why now? I asked. He hesitated. I've been watching from a distance for 3 months. Trying to decide if I had any right to shake up a little boy's life over what might just be coincidence. His voice cracked. But then I saw the cruise photos. Everyone smiling, so happy. And something hit me hard. What? I asked. You weren't in any of them, he said quietly. I went through Morgan's whole social media history. Hundreds of photos. Birthday parties. School events. Holidays. Your grandkids are always in them. Your son is in most of them. But you're barely there. Like you've been erased. His words landed like a punch. I thought of all the missed holidays. All the sudden schedule changes. The vague excuses. The moments that should have included me but didn't. David looked pained. I started thinking about how things ended with her and me. How she slowly cut me off from friends and family. How she made me feel like I was the problem. Too needy, too emotional. She convinced me the people who cared about me just didn't get it. She's doing the same thing to Jack, I whispered. And to you, he said, his eyes locking with mine. Which means if Caleb is my son, I'm not the only one she's hurting. You're a victim too. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a manila envelope. This is why I'm here, he said. Why I finally worked up the courage to knock on your door. What is it? I asked. DNA results, he said quietly. I managed to get a sample of Caleb's hair at the barbershop Morgan takes him to. Had it tested against my own DNA. His hands trembled as he handed me the envelope. I got the results yesterday. I stared at the envelope, afraid to open it, Inside could be the truth that either tears my family apart, or helps me save it. But there was no way to know which. Before you open that, David said, there's one more thing I need you to understand. I'm not trying to take Caleb away from the only father he's ever known. I'm not here to cause chaos. But I can't just stand by while Morgan lies and manipulates the people around him, including you. So what are you asking me to do? I said. I'm asking you to help me protect him. From her. From whatever game she's been playing. David's voice was calm now. Focused. Because if she lied about this, what else is she lying about? And how many more people could she hurt? I looked down at the envelope in my lap. It felt heavier than it should have. Outside, a car door slammed. Kids' laughter drifted down the street. The normal sounds of a normal neighborhood. A world where mothers didn't steal children. And grandmothers didn't disappear from their own family's story. But if I was honest with myself, I hadn't lived a normal life in a long time. I just didn't want to admit it. Mrs. Bennet, David said gently, his voice softened, almost kind. Are you ready to know the truth? I thought of Caleb's little face. The way he used to run to me with open arms before Morgan started putting a stop to that. I thought about Lily, who barely knew me anymore because I'd been left out of her life for so long. I thought about Jack, my son, slowly turned against me by a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. And I thought about that birthday dinner, all those chairs sitting empty, all those family photos where I might as well have never existed. Yes, I said, barely hearing my own voice. Then I opened the envelope. The DNA report was written in cold, clinical language. No emotion, no sympathy. Just numbers. 99.7% probability of paternity. The words swam in front of my eyes. I read them once, twice, 3 times, hoping something would change. Hoping it was all a mistake. But it wasn't. Caleb wasn't Jack's son. The little boy I'd watched take his first steps, help tie his first shoelaces, read bedtime stories to while he curled up in my lap. He wasn't biologically part of our family. And Jack, who had named Caleb after his grandfather, had no idea he'd been raising another man's child. I'm so sorry, David said quietly. He was still sitting on my couch, watching my face as I tried to make sense of it all. I know this must be hard to hear. I placed the papers on the table, my hands trembling so badly I was afraid I'd drop them. How long have you known for sure? Since yesterday, he said. But I've suspected for months. He reached for his phone again and showed me more photos. Caleb at the park. Caleb walking into school. Caleb riding his bike right down my street. You've been following them? I asked. I've been watching my son, he corrected gently. And trying to understand what kind of woman could take a child, lie about his identity, and build an entire life around that lie. That's when the anger hit me, fast and hot. Not at David. At Morgan. At the depth of her deception. At how cold and calculated it all was. She didn't just lie about who Caleb belonged to. She built her marriage on that lie. Used an innocent child to manipulate her way into our lives. She trapped Jack, I said sharply. She got pregnant by another man and used that baby to tie herself to my son. David nodded grimly. That's what it looks like. She left me right around the 2-month mark. Just starting to show. If she moved quickly, found someone trusting, she could have passed Caleb off as premature or just small. I flashed back to Caleb's birth. Jack had called me so excited, saying Morgan had gone into labor 3 weeks early. He was worried about complications, but the doctor said everything was fine. Now I saw why. Everything was fine. Caleb wasn't early. He was right on time, just not for Jack's timeline. He was born exactly when you'd expect if David had been the father. And the whirlwind romance, the fast engagement, the wedding that happened only 6 months after they met. I used to think it was all romantic. Meant to be. But now I saw it for what it was. She needed a father in place before the baby arrived. Someone stable. Someone trusting. Someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. That was Jack, David said, echoing my thoughts. The perfect mark. My son's always been honest to a fault, I whispered. He trusts people. He believes what they tell him. He doesn't even think to doubt. And Margaret used that, David said quietly. She turned his goodness into a weapon. There's more, he added, and something in his voice made my stomach twist. The investigator found other things. About Morgan. About why she might have tried so hard to get rid of you. What kind of things? I asked. David pulled out a folder and handed it to me. Inside were photos, documents, official records. Her real name is Margaret Winters, he said. She's 34, not 31 like she told Jack. Grew up in foster care. Aged out at 18. No real family, no ties to anyone. I looked down at an old school photo. Probably a high school yearbook. The girl in it was Morgan, but not quite. Her face was younger, harder. Her hair was darker. But the biggest difference was her eyes. They looked hungry. Like she'd been surviving for a long time and wasn't about to stop now. She's been married before, David continued. Twice. First to a Robert Kim in Nevada. Then to a James Fletcher in Oregon. Both marriages ended in divorce within 2 years. And both times she walked away with a good chunk of money. She's done this before, I whispered. The pattern is always the same. She finds a man with money or stability. Moves fast. Locks him in. Then slowly cuts him off from everyone around him. Friends, family, anyone who might catch on to what she's doing. I thought of how Jack's college friends had stopped coming around. How I'd noticed his work stories disappearing, replaced by vague mentions of stress. How he leaned on Morgan for everything. Social plans, emotional support, even basic decision-making. She's been isolating him, I said. And you, David added. Because you're the greatest threat to her control. Mothers notice things. They ask questions. They remember timelines. David leaned forward, his expression intense. She needed you out of the way. Not just distant, completely removed. That's why the sabotage. That's why the missed events. That's why she's been conditioning your family to function without you. The cruelty of it took my breath away. But why? I asked. If she already had Jack. If he thought Caleb was his, why go to all this trouble to erase me? Because you're a witness, David said. You were there when they met. When she got pregnant. When Caleb was born. If you ever started connecting the dots, you might have asked the right questions. She needed me irrelevant before I became dangerous, I murmured. I stood and walked to the window. I could see the street where Caleb had learned to ride a bike. The same one I'd cheered him on from. Bandaged his knees. Celebrated his milestones. He was still the same child, sweet, funny, bright. But the life we'd built around him, it was all a lie. What about Lily? I asked, bracing myself. As far as I can tell, she really is Jack's daughter, David said. She was born 2 years after Caleb, at a time when they were definitely together. He paused. But even that might have been part of the plan. If Morgan gave Jack a biological child, it would make it even harder for him to question Caleb's parentage. It sealed the bond even tighter. I felt sick. Everything about Jack's marriage, his home, his fatherhood, it was all part of someone else's strategy. And the worst part? She used children. Innocent children. Caleb doesn't know, does he? I asked. Of course not, David said. He's 7. As far as he's concerned, Jack is his dad. Always has been. And Lily? She just thinks her big brother looks different from her. Kids don't ask those kinds of questions. But adults should. And now I finally understood. I finally saw why Morgan had worked so hard to cut me out. A grandmother who's present, who spends real time with her grandkids, eventually notices when things don't add up. When the genetics don't match. When the timelines don't quite fit. David, I said slowly, why tell me all of this now? You could have gone to court. Fought for custody. Why involve me? He looked down at his hands for a long moment. Because when I saw those cruise photos, he said softly, I realized something. She's destroying your family too, David said, his voice steady. And if we don't stop her now, she'll just keep doing this to other people. What do you mean? I asked, even though deep down I already knew. She's already pulling Jack away from his friends, his co-workers, making sure he relies on her for everything. And she's training the kids to see him as the only parent who really matters. Caleb barely even talks about you anymore when I've seen them at the park. It's like she's scrubbing you right out of his memory. That hit me hard. I thought about how different Caleb had seemed lately. How he'd stopped running to hug me like he used to. How he'd glance at Morgan before answering any of my questions, like he needed her permission just to speak. I told myself it was just part of growing up. Becoming more independent. But now, maybe it wasn't that at all. Maybe it was something far more deliberate. She'll discard Jack eventually, David went on. Just like she did with me. Just like she did with her other husbands. But first she's going to make sure he's completely isolated. No friends, no family, no support. And when she's ready to walk away, he'll be alone. Used up. I closed my eyes and saw it, the lonely path ahead of my son. Abandoned. Emotionally drained. Probably broke too if Morgan was half as calculating as she appeared. And the kids? Caught in the middle of a lie they didn't even know they were living. What do you want me to do? I asked quietly. David stood up and began gathering his papers and photos. I want you to help me save our family, both of us. Because that's what we are, Mrs. Bennett. We're family. You're Caleb's grandmother in every way that matters, even if you're not his biological one. And I won't let Morgan destroy that just because she's scared of the truth. He handed me a business card with his number on it. Think about it. But don't take too long. They'll be back from the cruise in a few days. And when they are, Morgan will be watching you closely, looking for signs that you've become a threat again. If we're going to act, we have to do it soon. After he left, I just sat there, holding the DNA results in one hand, his card in the other. The late afternoon light was fading into evening and the house felt quiet. But this time it didn't feel empty. It felt like the pause before a storm. Because Margaret, whatever her real name was, had made a mistake. She tried to erase me. To push me out of my own family's story. But I wasn't gone yet. And now that I knew the truth, I wasn't going anywhere. 3 days after they came back from their cruise, I called Jack. My voice was calm, rehearsed. I'd practiced every word in my head more times than I could count. Hi, sweetheart, I said. I was wondering if we could all get together for dinner this weekend. I have something important I'd like to talk about, with you and Morgan. There was a pause on the other end. Is everything okay, Mom? You sound kind of serious. Everything's fine, I said. I just think it's time we had a real family conversation. About us. About the future. I've been thinking a lot while you were away. A longer pause followed. I could hear Morgan's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out what she was saying. When Jack returned to the line, his voice was cautious. Morgan wants to know what kind of conversation. She's worried you might still be upset about the timing of the cruise. Of course she was worried. Morgan's instincts were sharp enough to sense the shift even through the phone. Tell Morgan I'm not upset about anything, I said evenly. I just think it's important for families to be able to talk openly. Saturday evening would be perfect. I'll cook. Let me check with Morgan and call you back. The fact that my 38-year-old son had to check with his wife just to have dinner with his mother would have been funny if it hadn't hurt so much. But I kept my tone light. Of course. Let me know. He called back 2 hours later. Saturday at 6 is fine. Perfect. I'm really looking forward to it. That was Thursday. I spent Friday preparing for what I knew would be one of the most important conversations of my life. David and I had met 2 more times since his visit. We'd carefully planned how to reveal the truth, how to protect Caleb, and how to confront Morgan with the lies she'd built her life on. The DNA results were tucked neatly into a manila folder on my kitchen counter, right alongside copies of the records from David's investigator. Margaret Winter's real name, her 2 previous marriages, the timeline that proved Caleb couldn't possibly be Jack's biological son. Everything we needed. I cooked Jack's favorite dinner. Pot roast with garlic mashed potatoes and green beans, just like I made when he was a kid. If this ended up being our last real family dinner, I wanted it to feel familiar. I wanted it to feel like home. Saturday evening arrived with cold drizzle and gray skies. Typical October weather. I set the dining room table with my best china. The same plates I'd planned to use for my birthday dinner 2 weeks ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. They arrived exactly at 6. Morgan wore a flowing cream-colored dress that made her look young, gentle. Her hair was perfectly done. Her makeup flawless. She looked like the portrait of a loving wife and mother. Someone who couldn't possibly lie. Someone who knew how to play a role. Caleb burst through the door first, full of 7-year-old energy. Grandma Linda. I learned how to swim on the cruise. Wanna see me do the doggy paddle? My heart twisted. I hugged him tight, knowing what was coming would change everything. Maybe after dinner, sweetheart. Go wash your hands. Lily followed behind, quieter, clutching a ragged little doll in one arm. At 5 she was more cautious than her brother. Since Morgan started discouraging them from being too close with me, she'd pulled back. But she still let me kiss her forehead before going off to join Caleb. Jack hugged me warm and familiar. For just a moment it felt like old times. "Something smells amazing, Mom. I've missed your cooking." "You look tired," I said. And he did. New lines around his eyes. He'd lost weight. "Work's been crazy. The merger has everyone stretched thin," he said, glancing toward Morgan, who was scanning my living room like she was mentally listing off flaws. "But Morgan keeps reminding me to focus on work-life balance. Stress is terrible for your health," she added, stepping beside us with her practiced smile. "I keep telling Jack he should consider early retirement. We could travel more, spend time with the kids." Early retirement at 38. Just another way to cut Jack off from the outside world, from his income, his identity. I smiled politely. "How wonderful that you're thinking about the future. That actually ties into what I wanted to talk about tonight." During dinner I kept things light. The kids chatted non-stop about their cruise adventures while Morgan played her usual role, perfect mother. She cut Caleb's meat just right, reminded Lily to use her napkin, smiled with warmth that looked genuine. To anyone else it might have seemed picture perfect. But I was watching differently now. I saw what I'd missed before, how she gently interrupted Caleb when he mentioned missing me. How she quickly redirected Lily's attention when the little girl asked why Grandma didn't come on the trip. How she subtly steered every conversation and emotion in the room, managing the flow of affection like a seasoned puppeteer. After the kids finished eating, I suggested they go play in the living room while the grown-ups talked. But Morgan objected right away. "Oh, they should probably get ready to head home soon. Tomorrow's a school day and we try to keep their routine consistent." "This won't take long," I said, my tone firmer than before. "And actually what I need to share might affect their routine quite a bit." Something shifted in her face just for a second, but I caught it. Fear. Once the children were settled in the next room with their toys, I walked back to the dining table where Jack and Morgan were waiting. The manila folder sat beside my coffee cup like a live grenade. "So," Jack said, reaching across the table to take Morgan's hand, "what did you want to talk about?" I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of everything we were about to confront. "I want to talk about honesty. About family. About knowing who we really are." Morgan's smile twitched, tightened ever so slightly. "That's a little philosophical for dinner conversation, don't you think?" "Is it?" I replied calmly. "I don't think so." I picked up the manila folder and I could feel the tension grow instantly. "I've learned a few interesting things lately, about family history, genetics, the importance of knowing the truth when it comes to our children and our lives." "Mom," Jack said slowly. "What's in the folder?" "The truth." I opened it and gently laid the DNA results on the table between us. "These are the results of a paternity test for Caleb." The silence was immediate and crushing. Jack stared at the paper like it might catch fire. Morgan went rigid, her face a mask of blank control. "A paternity test?" Jack's voice was barely audible. "Why would you? How did you even?" I met his eyes. "The test shows you're not Caleb's biological father. There's a 99.7% probability that another man is. David Chen." Morgan shot up from her chair, the legs screeching against the floor. "This is insane, Linda. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing." "Sit down, Margaret." The name landed like a punch. She staggered slightly, color draining from her face. Jack looked back and forth between us, his voice cracked with panic. "Margaret? Mom, what the hell is going on?" I pulled out the rest of the documents. The investigator's report. Marriage certificates. Timelines. Her real name is Margaret Winters. She's been married twice before. She has a documented pattern of lying about her identity and her past. Before she met you, she was involved with David Chen. She left him while she was pregnant and came looking for someone to raise that child. "That's not true," Morgan said, but her voice was shaking now. "Jack, don't listen to this. Your mother's having some kind of breakdown." "Caleb was born 7 months after you two met," I continued, refusing to slow down. "You thought he was premature. He wasn't. He was right on schedule, just not yours." Jack picked up the test results, his hands trembling. I watched the blood drain from his face as he took in the numbers. This can't be right," he whispered. "David's been searching for his son for 7 years," I said. "He found you 3 months ago. He's been watching, trying to decide how to handle it. He came to me because he recognized what Morgan was doing. He's lived through it himself. Morgan was slowly backing toward the hallway, her mask slipping more by the second. Jack, please. Don't let her turn you against me. Think about our life together. Think about our family. Our family. Jack's voice cracked. Our family that's built on a lie? Our son who isn't really our son. He is your son in every way that matters, she said desperately. You've raised him. You love him. But it's all been based on a lie. Jack slammed his hand on the table and the silverware jumped. Everything, Morgan. Everything's been a lie. From the living room I heard Caleb and Lily laughing, sweet and innocent. Still playing, unaware their entire world was shattering just feet away. There's more, I said quietly, pulling out the documents from her past marriages. She's done this before. Met men. Married them fast. Cut them off from their families. Then moved on. You're not her first victim, Jack. Just the one who stuck the longest. He stared at the paperwork, chest rising and falling too fast. Then his voice dropped to a near whisper. The cruise. Mom's birthday. That wasn't just bad timing, was it? Morgan said nothing. He didn't have to. You planned it, Jack said almost to himself. You made sure she'd be alone. You wanted her to feel forgotten. I was protecting our family, Morgan snapped. From what? He shot back. From my mother, the woman who raised me, who's always been there for me. From someone who might have figured out the truth. I nodded. That's exactly what this has been about. All the excuses, the sudden changes, the missed invitations. She needed to isolate you before you started asking questions. Jack turned to look at his wife who wasn't who she said she was. Who'd lied every step of the way. Was any of it real? He asked, his voice broken. Do you love me at all? Or was I just convenient? And for the first time since I met her, Morgan had no answer. No smile. No quick pivot. No sweet performance. Just silence. From the other room, Caleb's voice rang out. Daddy, can we have ice cream? Jack closed his eyes. A single tear slipped down his cheek. What do I tell them? He whispered. How do I explain this to my children? We'll figure it out, I said, reaching across the table to hold his hand. Together. As a family. Because Caleb is still your son, Jack. That hasn't changed. You've been there for every moment. But he also has a biological father who loves him and who wants to be part of his life. And if we handle this right, maybe, just maybe, that can be a good thing. Morgan turned toward the door, but I called out. Margaret. She froze but didn't turn back. David isn't going to disappear this time. And neither am I. If you try to run with the children, we will find you. If you try to manipulate this situation, I told her, my voice steady, or hurt these kids just to protect yourself, we'll stop you. Your days of controlling this family are over. She didn't respond. She just walked out the door, leaving behind the sound of children laughing and the wreckage of 7 years of lies. But for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was losing everything. I felt like I was finally starting to get it back. 6 months later, I was in my kitchen preparing Sunday dinner when I heard the front door open and Caleb's voice shout, Grandma, we brought dessert. I'm in here, sweetheart. I called back, smiling as I heard his little feet pounding down the hall. He came bursting into the kitchen, clutching a bakery box nearly too big for him to carry. Right behind him was Lily, walking more carefully, holding out a bouquet of daisies. These are for you, she said shyly. Daddy said yellow's your favorite color. I knelt to take the flowers, pulling her into a hug she didn't hesitate to return. They're perfect, sweetheart. Thank you. Jack appeared in the doorway next, looking healthier than I'd seen him in years. The stress weight was gone and the tightness around his eyes had softened. Behind him came David, still a little careful around our new family dynamic, but easing into his place. Something smells amazing, Jack said, kissing my cheek. Is that your famous apple pie? Caleb specifically requested it, I said, smiling and ruffling the boy's hair. And mashed potatoes. And that chicken recipe you've loved since you were a kid, the one with the herbs. Caleb lit up. That's my favorite too. Just like Daddy's. The way he called both Jack and David Daddy still took some getting used to. But the children had adjusted to this new version of family with the kind of grace only kids seem to have. Caleb called Jack Daddy, and David Daddy Dave. Lily had simply accepted it the same way some of her classmates had 2 houses. David placed a bottle of wine on the counter, glancing around my kitchen like he was still careful not to overstep. How can I help? You can set the table, I said warmly. The good china's in the dining room cabinet. It had taken months to get here. Months of family therapy, gentle conversations with the kids, and legal proceedings that ended with Morgan's voluntary surrender of custody in exchange for avoiding charges. She'd vanished again just like she had from David's life 7 years ago. But this time she left the children behind. The transition was hard. Caleb had been devastated by her absence. Lily, anxious and clingy, had trouble sleeping and cried when Jack left the room. There were nights full of tears and tantrums. But there was healing too. Jack had moved back into the house he once shared with Morgan, though it felt different now. That heavy air of secrets and walking on eggshells was gone. David had rented an apartment 10 minutes away, close enough to be involved, far enough to give everyone room to breathe. Grandma, Caleb said, tugging my apron, can I tell you a secret? I knelt again. Of course. He cupped his hands and whispered, I'm glad you found Daddy Dave. Now I have more daddies than anyone in my class. My heart squeezed. This little boy had taken something so complicated and turned it into something to be proud of. I'm glad too, sweetheart. He leaned in closer, his voice quieter. And I'm glad Mommy Morgan went away. She was always mad. It broke my heart that a 7-year-old had noticed that kind of tension. But it reassured me too. Kids knew more than we gave them credit for. Caleb had felt it, even if he didn't understand it fully. At dinner, conversation flowed naturally. The kids chattered about school and friends. David told us about Caleb's recent soccer game. He'd scored his first goal. Jack shared Lily's excitement about her new dance class. We talked like a real family. Not traditional, maybe, but genuine in a way Morgan's perfectly staged version had never been. As we cleared the table, Jack said, I got a call from my lawyer yesterday. The divorce is final. I paused. How do you feel? He watched Caleb help David load the dishwasher. Relieved mostly. Grateful it's over. Especially that it didn't hurt the kids more than it already has. Any regrets? He nodded slowly. Not about ending it. But yeah. I regret not seeing the truth sooner. I regret what it did to you. How much time we lost. I put my hand on his shoulder. You can't blame yourself for trusting someone you loved. That's not a flaw, Jack. That's what it means to be human. David joined us at the counter, drying his hands on a dish towel. Any word from her? He asked quietly. Nothing, Jack replied. Her lawyer said she doesn't want any contact. No visitation. No phone calls. Nothing. That might be for the best, I said. Maybe it was. Still, I couldn't quite understand how any mother could walk away from her children so completely. But at least now they wouldn't have to live in fear of her returning. Later, after the kids had fallen asleep watching a movie, the 3 of us sat around my kitchen table with coffee and leftover pie. These evenings had become some of my favorite moments. Quiet, peaceful, full of planning and talking and learning how to be a different kind of family. I've been thinking about something, David said, stirring sugar into his mug. About Caleb's last name. Jack looked up, suddenly alert. What about it? He's been Patterson his whole life. That's who he is. His school records, everything. I wouldn't change that. But, David hesitated, then said, would it be okay if I took your name too? Officially, I mean. David Patterson-chin. That way Caleb and I would share a part of a name. But he'd still be connected to you and to this family's history. The gesture hit me so hard I felt tears sting my eyes. Jack looked stunned. You'd do that? I want Caleb to grow up understanding that families can be complicated without being broken, David said. That loving someone doesn't mean choosing sides. It means honoring every connection that matters. Jack reached across the table and shook David's hand. I think that's perfect. As the evening wound down and David gathered the kids for their weekly overnight at his place, I pulled him aside before they left. Thank you, I said softly. He looked surprised. For what? For saving my family. For telling me the truth, when it would have been easier to disappear again. David stood by the door for a moment, watching Caleb gather his backpack and clutch his favorite stuffed animal. Then he turned to me. You know what I realized that day I showed up at your door? He said quietly. I wasn't just losing my son. You were losing your family too. Morgan was pulling all of us apart one piece at a time. He smiled, and for the first time since I'd met him it reached his eyes. "But we stopped her," he said. "We really did." I looked around my home. At the children's artwork taped to the refrigerator. At Lily's little sweater draped over the back of a chair. At the framed family photos that now included David. This wasn't the family I'd once imagined when Jack got married, but it was so much more than the empty performance Morgan had tried to sell us. It was real. After everyone left, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the quiet of the living room, thinking about how much my life had changed since that heartbreaking birthday 6 months ago. Back then this house felt like a tomb. Now it pulsed with life. With laughter. With second chances. David asking thoughtful questions about our family traditions. Jack finally opening up about the future instead of just surviving the present. The kids giggling down the hall. The home felt alive again. My phone buzzed. Text from Jack. "Thanks for dinner, Mom. The kids are asking if we can do this every Sunday." I told them that's up to Grandma. I smiled, typing back. "Every Sunday sounds perfect. This is what families do." His reply came almost immediately. "Yes. This is what real families do." I set the phone down and looked at the framed photo on the end table, taken last month at the zoo. All 5 of us huddled together in front of the elephant enclosure. Caleb perched proudly on David's shoulders. Lily holding tight to my hand. Jack in the middle, arms wrapped around both of us, grinning like he finally remembered what happiness felt like. We looked like what we were. A family that had been broken and rebuilt. Stronger, messier, but more honest than before. Not perfect, but true. As night fell and the house settled into stillness, it didn't feel empty. It felt full, of possibility, of love, of everything Morgan had tried to destroy but couldn't. I used to think my 65th birthday marked the end of my place in this family's story. But it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The start of a chapter where love wasn't conditional. Where the truth meant more than appearances. Where being a grandmother meant doing what needed to be done to protect your grandchildren, even if that meant standing against their own mother. Tomorrow was Monday. Caleb had soccer practice. Lily had her dance class. David would take Caleb while Jack took Lily. Afterward they'd both come back here for homework and dinner. It was a rhythm Morgan would have controlled and micromanaged, but now it flowed naturally. Not out of fear but out of real care. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I thought about the woman who had once tried to erase me from my own family. Somewhere out there Margaret, was probably spinning a new identity. Crafting a new story. Looking for her next family to infiltrate. But she'd left behind something she could never take back. The love between people who chose to fight for one another instead of walking away. She taught us what we didn't want to be. And in the process she helped us discover exactly who we were meant to become. For that, if nothing else, I guess I owe her a strange sort of thanks. But mostly, I just feel sorry for her. She had a real family. Complicated, flawed, but genuine. And she threw it away for the empty comfort of control. Her loss. Our gain. And finally, after months of feeling like a ghost in my own life, I was home. Now I'm curious about you, the one who listened to my story all the way through. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever been through something like this? Tell me in the comments. And while you're here, I'm leaving 2 more stories on the screen. One's my subscribers love and I know they'll surprise you too. Thanks for watching all the way until the end.